What's going on, everybody? Hope you are having a wonderful week so far. So before we start, I've got a new record coming out. It's out now on Trick. It's called Rock With Me, and the second record is called Lust. Go check it out if you haven't. Also, before we start the podcast, don't forget to hit subscribe, follow it, like it. It just makes sure that the podcast keeps going. So this week on the podcast, one and only Andy MacDougall. Andy is a producer, a mix engineer, and a mastering engineer. He masters every single one of my records that comes out, or 99% of them. I really like him as a person, his insight into the industry, his technical insight as well is amazing. I thought this podcast was going to get really geeky, but it didn't. So it was just a really good conversation. And then we spoke about music and lots of things to do with music. And then we kind of got into his mastering business, AM/PM Audio. And he's mastered for some of the biggest artists in the world, from Calvin Harris. He does a lot of tour rooms. I'm pretty sure he does a lot of Solado's work. Yeah, he's done a lot and achieved a lot and is a very insightful guy. So without further ado, Andy MacDougall. And we're live. Andy, how's it going, mate?
Good, man. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. I actually, I had a hernia operation last week. So I'm just coming to the end of the recovery being good. Mm-hmm. So this is my first bit of work that I've done. Although this isn't really fucking work, is it? Let's be honest. But yeah, it's good, man. I can't really complain. Whereabouts in the world are you at the moment?
I'm in Ealing, which is West London.
I didn't know you were in London.
Yeah. I was originally I grew up in Yorkshire.
Yeah.
But I moved to London 15 years ago.
Okay.
To make it in the big city in music, and it's going all right, I suppose.
Yeah, not bad, man. Not bad. So before we get into it, I kind of want to get a bit about what you do and kind of where it started, and kind of just give the people listening. You're a man behind the scenes as well. I know you have an artist project as well, but from our relationship, I know you mostly through mixing and mastering, which is a really key part of music, not just in dance music, in every type of genre of music. And I think a lot of people don't know about it, which is why I wanted to get you on, because I think it's really, really interesting. But how did it start from growing up in Yorkshire to moving to London and kind of going through that? Was mixing and mastering you woke up and was I want to do this, or was it producing music then the mixing and mastering came?
Yeah. No, I there was never any intent to be to be a mastering engineer or to be to do mixing. I was wanted to be an artist, and actually that's still my ambition.
Yeah.
I love writing music, but living in London's expensive.
Yeah.
And so I used to write music when there was money to be made from selling. There were CD compilations still. I kind of got used to getting pretty decent paydays from tracks coming out on compilations.
Yeah.
And then when I moved to London, that kind of dropped off a cliff because of streaming.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I started when I was about 11. I found I don't know if you know what Fast Tracker is.
No, what's that?
You've got a tracker, so they're basically software to write music, but they're vertical scrolling and alphanumeric, and so it goes 0 to 9 and then A, B, C, D, E, F, and that's your 16 for your times for your music, right? So that was a kind of niche way of making music back when I was 10, 11 years old. And I found this thing on a floppy disk, and I was just fascinated by it. And it came packaged up with all jungle and hardcore and break sounds, and I was just obsessed. you know, like when you find something like that when you're 11, and I look like, you know, at 11, I loved the Prodigy. So I was trying to recreate Prodigy tunes and all sorts.
Yeah.
So, you know, I actually started really young with like making music. And just kind of, you know, got pretty obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And I used to write like prog and like prog house and trance. And like trance was massive in Yorkshire when I was growing up. So when I went away to uni, I was just like writing a lot of trance and progressive house, you know, the kind of Sash and Digweed. Like I used to go to Gatecrasher all the time, right? And so it was anything that was going on there. So it would vary from like Maro Picotto to Sash and Digweed to Paul Van Dyke doing his epic 6-hour sets. So that, you know, it was amazing having that music, and that was what inspired me early on. And then I kind of never really intended to do it like properly. You know what I mean? Like it was always like a kind of really fun hobby. I worked in finance after uni, and then one day.
Is that what you studied?
No, I studied environmental science.
Okay.
That wasn't for me either. So I went into finance because I had lots of money, right? And started it, and I just realised that everybody that I worked with, they were just awful people. They would just do anything to make a bit of extra money. You know? And I was just like, yeah, that's not for me either. So
it's like those all those documentaries that you kind of see on Netflix, right, about the environment, and then you see that it's just like big corporations behind it, just doing like wording everything correctly, just to make it sound like you're doing a better thing. And then realistically, you're doing absolutely nothing. I saw Sainsbury's, which is anybody listening in America or anywhere else, it's like a big popular supermarket in the UK. They're doing something about like, I think it was like eat less meat and eat more vegetables or something like that for the environment. And I'm just like, where's the science behind all of this? Like, but it's like, it's mad what these corporations are doing just to try and sell a bit more, because that's all they're doing it for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they say basically wherever the wind blows, that's what happens. They are just weather vanes. So if the big popular thing at the moment is vegan, then they'll just do loads of stuff about vegan, like advertising. You know, they are corporations to make profit.
Of course they are.
Yeah. And I was very briefly a part of that, and I don't know. Like I worked with a lot of like the clients were very wealthy people. Yeah. And they just were very miserable, and they just were very miserly. And I'm like, oh, God, that's not for me. You know, and then on the weekends I go out raving. I'm like, this is for me. One day I just was like, I just went, no more of this. And I quit very dramatically. Like, had a slanging match with my boss, and then I had to work my 2-week notice. So that was awkward. But yeah, and then after that I was like, right, I got home, and I was living with my parents at the time. Yeah. And I went home and I'm like, Dad, I've quit my job. I'm going to do my music. And he's like, what the fuck? So that didn't really go down well. And then it took a good like 10 or 15 years for, it to really start to come together where, it's a very opaque thing, the music industry, to people who don't know about it from the outside. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm making music. He's like, well, what is it in the charts? I'm like, no, it's not in the charts. Like, well, what's the point then? And it took a very long time to kind of get across to him that it was actually going quite well. And now he's like all over it, and he's super, super proud. But yeah. How did you get into it?
It's tough, isn't it, when it's like that with your parents? How did I get into it? Years ago, when I was from like the age of 9, I always wanted to DJ. And then like we had like a family friend who did like local like discos at the local caravan site. So I used to go and help him when I was young, and then did weddings. And then I was like, my brother got me into like dance music, as what we would say is dance music. It was like trancey, housey kind of stuff. And then I went to see Faithless live and was like, oh, I'm hooked. And then that was it for me. And I think I learned how to DJ proper, like mix, when I was 13. Started writing when I was 14, and then like always took it seriously, but was like you don't ever understand what you have to do right in the industry. Like, you don't realize even back then how important making music is in the industry to kind of get your name out there and things like that. So I didn't really, I think I lived in Ibiza. I was DJing. I had residencies out there from the age of 17 to 20. And then 21, I was like, fuck Ibiza off. Let's go and actually make some music properly. And like really knuckle down. And then it took me 3-4 years to get to the point where I was touring full time. That's
pretty quick as well.
Some
people laughed at it for a decade and never see the kind of success that you have.
Yeah, I was super lucky, really lucky. But I also had this like really weird, stupid kind of personality where if I want to do something, I'm really going to fucking do everything to do it. And like, I kind of did it very like chronological, if that's the right word for it, where I was like, okay, so what music do I like? And out of that music, who's doing it really well? And what record label do I need to be part of for me to be touring? So, and that was Dirty Bird for me at the time. I did a few things before that, but it was just like, how can I get my music heard to the most amount of people, and also how can I get booked through a record label, because no one's going to book me otherwise, if you know what I mean, at this moment in time. And how can I kind of create value for myself? Yeah, and just looked at it like that and was like, okay, Dirty Bird is the one. And then just worked my way up. It's a bit different nowadays though, because it's record labels aren't necessarily, there's some record labels that are like that, and there's some record, like, I wouldn't even say Dirty Bird is like that anymore. But I think it's just about, for me, it was just about finding a crew that like I could really be part of. And like I did everything to be part of Dirty Bird. Like from day one with Barclay, Claude, like we didn't even know each other, and I'd like do like Skype calls with him and like make sure that he doesn't forget who I am. And like I would send him, I'd write so much music, so I'd send him like a new record every week. I think there was like 1 year which I was like the most released person on Dirty Bird, and like I just would always just make sure I was there, just be that annoying person, but not in an annoying way. And yeah, it's got to where I am now, really.
I mean, it's a really good strategy. I want to be an artist, but the problem is I don't really know what music I like.
Yeah.
So I at the moment I have 4 projects. I have a prog house one. But even within that prog house one, I have variations. Like sometimes I've never gone, what's the sort of music that will help me get gigs?
Yeah.
I think mainly because I don't actually like DJing at all. I'll leave that to people who are really good at it.
Yeah.
And like I prefer writing music. So I've always been like, I kind of like write music, and I think what is it that I'm feeling at the moment? And sometimes it'll just be listening to a playlist or listening to a mix and just going, I love that sound. Maybe I'll try and do something along those lines, or like, kind of combine those. Maybe I'll, come up with an idea. But what ends up happening is that I'm pulled in too many different directions.
Yeah.
Like if 10 years ago, well, like I'm 40 next month. Right?
Yeah.
So if when I kind of started writing music 20 years ago, seriously, I suppose, I just said, I'm going to make this, and this is going to be my sound, and I'm going to stick to it. I would have had so much more success. But week after week, I would flip between, I used to make trance, and I did okay at trance. But then I kind of thought, it's not really for me. I lost the whole like sound of the genre and the way I don't know. It just lost its magic, I think, for me. So I just moved away from it completely, and I got really into like more underground stuff when I moved to London. So I started writing house and breaks and all sorts, and there was never any actual concerted direction to go, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
These are the labels I'm going to sign to. This is how I'm going to build my name up. And that's, I think, why, I've written so many tracks, and there's been plenty of successes with individual tracks, but never as a kind of, as an artist overall. Whereas when it comes to the business side of things, like AM/PM audio, I'm so much more focused with that.
Yeah.
Like I have a really clear strategy. I know where I'm going over the next couple of years.
Why do you think that is, though?
I don't know. I think that musically, I'm almost musically I'm indecisive, but when it comes to business, I'm quite, I guess, switched on.
I guess what I would kind of argue against that is that you're in the music business. So why can't, what are you struggling with doing that to music? So like converting your business mind to the music side of it and looking at it as, and I don't necessarily agree you should always do this, but looking at the music side of thing, the creative side of thing as a business. That's all I did, if you know what I mean. That's for me, that's all. And for like, there's two ways, and there's millions of ways you can do it, but there's two ways that I look at it, how you can kind of, or maybe three ways. One, which we all know, is have a hit record, right? That's the one way to kind of go there. But I think sometimes if you have a hit record and you don't have the foundations, it's pretty hard to kind of keep that going. So the second one is go sign to a record label that gives you an audience. And then, which is what I did to start with. And then thirdly, start your own thing and build it over years and years, which is what I'm doing now. But the third thing does take time, takes a lot longer.
And money.
Yeah, and money. But you don't have to spend that, nowadays you don't have to spend that much money. Like you can, how much realistically does it cost to release a record, apart from your time writing the record, mix and mastering, artwork? Like you don't really, like you need a good distributor, which doesn't cost you, they just take percentages. As long as you got great branding, which let's say cost $250 to £500 or dollars a release. Like, I know that's a lot of money, but you don't even need that, if you know what I mean. You can make it cheaper.
I think the biggest cost, and probably the one that established labels have almost for free, is that early on you have to buy exposure. So advertising, promo, those kinds of things.
I agree with you to a certain extent. But if the branding does well and you can get it to enough DJs to play it, which we all can, if you know what I mean, we can DM enough DJs and ask for their promo email or ask for their email address. Like, I don't think the value of promo companies now are that's why they're so much cheaper than what they used to be. Because an email used to be so much more important than what it is now. The amount of people that I get asking for my email address on a weekly basis is ridiculous.
Do you give it out?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't see any, like, do I listen to promos? Very rarely. But I will, if somebody sends me a personal email address and goes, I sent you this message on Instagram, I'm from here, this is what I'm trying to do, like, I will listen to it. It might take me a week or two, but I'm going to listen to it.
That's cool.
But I think, like, realistically, let's say 500 quid a release, and that's putting some money. But I know there's a lot of labels that don't even spend that. behind their releases, and that's how much it would probably cost. But I think by doing that, you're growing a brand that allows you to do what you want, and you don't have to be in the confines of other people's sounds and labels.
Yeah, and you don't have to deal with like the A&R. So if you write a track and you're happy with it and you send it over, and then they want changes, or your sound could be compromised, or they might just not get it.
Yeah,
which
totally.
there's like labels often have considerations, like if you don't have that bigger profile already, even if it's a great track, they won't sign it because then you're not big enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my plan is to start a label. We were going to launch it a year and a half ago, but we didn't in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much a long time. So we've written some more music, and it's techno. It's sort of like a combination of techno, so like the kind of big rolling techno low ends, but then with the progressive sort of synths and a little bit more melody. Because I don't know, I love techno, but it's gone a bit hard house recently.
It's gone a bit trancey as well, hasn't it? It's
yeah. And I'm like, no, I already did that all 20 years ago. Like, I'd like to hear something different. And so kind of like trying to get that, the clarity and the depths of techno, but without the cheesiness that seems to have crept into a little, to a certain extent.
It's got cheesy, hasn't it? And it's got like so samey, which is such a shame. I was on Instagram the other day. Do you know A Vision or A Vision? He's like you should check him out. His music's insane. He's like a New York techno producer, but it's like very New York techno. It's not like what you'd expect as techno today. It's like very groovy, very like percussion based. It's funky. It's fucking amazing. Anyway, he posted a video of Boiler Room doing like they had some DJ playing a techno set, or they said it was a techno set, and she was literally playing, the girl that was DJing, although she was smashing it, was playing Tiesto, Lethal Industry, and we were like, this is trance.
I mean, like it's a great track,
fucking amazing track.
There's some of the kind of roots of techno now. It comes from that sort of sound for sure. But yeah, that was a straight up trance track.
It was great. I loved that record when it was out. It's so mad, isn't it, to think like where he's gone as an artist, from like what he was known for to what he's known for now. And I think that goes back to like what you're saying about like going from sound to sound. I think it's actually okay to jump sounds as long as the story is kind of documented correctly. Because I think there's a lot of let's say for instance like Maceo Plex, like although he's like one of a kind, no one could ever emulate his career because it's just unbelievable what he's done. But if you listen to the stuff that he released at the beginning to the stuff that he released,
kind of like quite housey, deep housey,
yeah. Like
I love the records as well, but it's such a tangent he's gone off on.
Same, but I think he's done the journey so well, he's done the story so well that you can get away with it.
He's kept his credibility just absolutely perfectly.
Yeah.
I mean, like, he's way up there. He's one of my all-time favourite artists. Man. Just phenomenal. Something about the way he produces his low end. I don't know how he does it. Everything sounds huge.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he's great.
Hardware, I reckon.
Do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hardware there. I don't know though.
Like, he used to be an engineer, didn't he?
Oh, did he?
Before, yeah, like a ghost producer before he was Maceo Plex, and he did like he's got another alias,
Matrix and Mario Itello.
Yeah. So I think that he's had like a few years as a producer.
Yeah.
Before kind of, so it's like he's kind of tested out a few things and then honed in on this one and made a success out of out of this.
Yeah.
Well, I think that often, so, that's often the case. And one of the best things about, the music we make is that you can do something, you can kind of build a name up, and then if it all goes off the rails, you just go, start again. Yeah. And you learn from your mistakes, don't you?
Yeah, there's one thing that I haven't done, really. I've never changed my name. I've got aliases that aren't really aliases, like, because I don't release on them, like, properly. But yeah, I don't know. I've just kind of, like, every mistake I've done, I've just, like, worked it out and just changed it for the next one for Will Clarke, which I don't know if is necessarily the best thing to do, because I think sometimes starting from fresh is, like, so nice, but also daunting as shit. Like, if I needed to start a whole new project today, like, fuck knows, man.
I mean, you'd have all the contacts. You'd have the kind of, nous of, like, I did that wrong last time. I'll make sure I don't do it. But then I guess so the problem that I seem to be having at the moment is that I'm like, I'm starting fresh with a new alias and a new project. But I'm like, well, I've done a few projects before and things have kind of not gone, like it's been fine, but I changed the sound so dramatically that the fan base changes or whatever. So this time round, I'm overly cautious about starting, because I'm like, I want to make sure it's perfect, to the point where I've not even released anything yet.
Yeah.
Which is, that it's almost like a hindrance.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to, go through the tunes, sign them off, and just say that is done now.
Yeah.
Put them out and just see what happens. Like, I don't know if you get this, but where you sit on a track for a while and you've listened to it a few too many times, maybe, and then you go, is it actually good?
Yeah.
And I think I'm in that situation with some of them.
It's tough, that, isn't it? I don't really do that. I've done that on things where I'm releasing a record that doesn't sound like me. I think you mastered them, like Run Run. The record I did with Jaded and Arco. Like, that was, like, not really a Will Clarke record, but we loved writing it and it just sounded right at the time. But looking back at it, I'm like, I'm probably never going to play that in a DJ set. And I know releasing it, I was like, this is a bit weird. But I think sometimes you just got to fucking... What is the worst that's going to happen? As long as the record sounds good and I know that I can stand by my word and be like, yes, it's a good record, then I'm like, fuck it, let's just do it.
I think, I suppose you DJ and I don't. Yeah. I don't even know if I ever will.
Yeah.
But, like, I suppose when you're sitting down writing something, you're kind of also have the consideration that maybe it'll fit in the set at this point, or so you have that it's an impetus to write stuff, but also that audience to test it on. And if you see something working, then that is obviously, that's a big buzz, but it's also a really good motivator to finish it off, put it out, because you know it works. And I guess we had, me and my mate Hilton. Do you know Hilton Caswell? He used to run a wicked venue called Giggleham in southwest London.
No, I don't know. No.
Yeah, so me and him, we partnered up and we were like a duo called Trilucid. And we had a residency at Gallery on Fridays, Ministry of Sound.
Yeah.
And that was great because it was generally like 9 times out of 10 it was warming up for whichever headliner it was. So that fitted in with the proggy sound that we were making, and got to play these tracks and see which ones worked and see which ones didn't. And that it was really motivating. But then, just for various reasons that fizzled out. And, we kind of went our separate ways. me and Hilton are still working together, but we've, Gallery kind of changed the way they were going. Yeah. And so losing that changed your kind of relationship with writing.
Yeah.
It's like, it wasn't writing. It's like, we've got a gig Friday. Let's get a new tune smashed out so we can test it out in the crowd. Now it's almost so open-ended.
Yeah.
It's more kind of difficult to finish something off because you can't test it out and go, it works amazing. You send it out to your friends and sound people out. And, don't know.
Do you ever engineer for people?
Yeah, I used to. I used to do that. So when I first moved to London, starting about sort of 15 years ago, I was engineering for people.
Yeah.
And I was making.
Mate, one sec. Is your window open?
Oh yeah, hang on a sec.
Sorry, bud. It's just coming. I think it's kids closing out from school. Oh, that's much better.
Yeah, sorry. I think he fell over and he was crying. I didn't even notice.
Bloody kids. Cheers, mate. Yeah, you were talking about engineering.
Yeah, so yes, I did. That was my main income for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And I was doing tech house because that was the big thing. I did produce tracks for all sorts of labels.
Yeah.
Snatch when they were
big,
like a really big label. Tool Room and Saved and pretty much every tech house label I've written something for.
Because I think that's what I'm thinking is if what you're saying is you're not DJing, is would you ever consider working with somebody as a project where they're the DJ, you're writing music for them, but it's kind of like a 50-50 deal where you write all the music, they do all the DJ, and kind of between you both you do the marketing, but you're just you're not even there. No one sees you, no one knows you're part of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So that's exactly what we're doing with the techno. So I've partnered up with my mate Phil.
Yeah.
And he's a DJ. He's a cracking DJ. So we've been making techno, but then that project started. We were writing for it, and then we decided we were going to start a label. We sent our tracks out to 4 or 5 top labels, but the feedback was nice tracks, but we don't know who you are.
Yeah.
And so we just thought, okay, the only option really left is to start a label ourselves, because I don't see any point in sending them to lower level labels, because maybe they do a good job, maybe they don't, but it's a bit, it seemed better to kind of hold on to them and build your own brand, exactly like you're doing.
It's 100% the way. 100% the way. It takes longer, and it costs a bit more money, but it's unless you can sign to. This is the thing, is even with the big labels, you need an EP that does really well for you to kind of grow big from that. Because these big labels are releasing so much music. If they're releasing a record a week or a record every other week, you're just going to get lost in the kind of the traffic of releases. It has to be
some of it's bragging rights as well, or so you release a track on Drum Code. So in terms of so in terms of brand to be associated with, that's massive. And it's it's got a really good reach. So when you're doing gigs and and you put your name and then what label you're on after, that on the credits looks great.
Yeah.
It is a big part of it, even if it doesn't necessarily that track on its own may not kind of do amazingly or have that bigger reach, but the actual kind of bragging rights is quite important, I think.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I totally agree. It comes. It does help, I think, to a certain extent, when the brand of the record label has a sell themselves. I say it all the time, and Juna Deep, the whole Anjuna kind of vibe. Their fan base is ridiculous. Like they release so much music, and the artists that grow big from Anjuna Deep grow massive, and it's purely because the fan base is just so strong. So strong.
I've signed to Anjuna in the past.
Yeah.
And I send demos to them. So there's a couple that they've picked up recently, which is nice. But one of the best, Grum, who's a Scottish artist, he's such a great producer, makes wicked tunes. And he, a few years ago, he kind of pivoted his sound a little bit and signed to Anjuna.
Yeah.
And then he's been working with them, and now he's like one of their core artists, you know? And I've been mastering some of the stuff recently that he's been doing for Anjuna. And he's got it's quite a unique sound, and it's not necessarily within the it's not necessarily within the sound of the label.
Yeah.
But they've obviously given him enough artistic freedom that he can write stuff that they're supporting and backing, and it fits in with the label because they've essentially opened up the scope of what they're releasing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like their fan base is huge.
It's wild.
But when they back their artists as well, it's not just a matter of releasing some records. They put loads of events on and they book the people who are part of it.
It's a proper label for me. Is that it's not about growing the head artist that owns the record label. It's about releasing really good music and growing the label artist, really. Which for me is what I want to do with All We Have Is Now, is like actually release records. I only want to sign like 2 or 3 artists a year and just really just like release them and get them touring and bring them touring with me, get them touring by themselves. And then just really kind of help artists grow rather than do more than what a record label does. Is nowadays it's just releasing your record. Like I don't just want to do that. I don't just want to do the touring. It's kind of a bit of everything. I want to be able to have like my management team help manage them, bring things in for them and things like that. I think it's really important because like we said, like releasing a record is easy now. It's so easy. There's no real skill in it apart from contacts. And if you end up talking to enough people, you have all the contacts yourself. So definitely do that, man. Definitely do it.
With the idea of bringing just a couple of artists on each year, will you have a label plus management and then combine the two? So if you're doing the label, you can help build artists up, put events on, book them for your events, and then have them on an artist's management. Or will you have a management that you work with, or what do you think you do there?
So it'll probably be a bit of both. It's kind of just down to whatever the artist wants. So let's say, for instance, the record that you've just mastered for us, the MacDougall, that's coming out in February, I think. Like he's the first guy that we've signed to the label, and he's a really good mate of mine. Like I've known him for a few years. His music's unreal. And I'm taking him on tour with me next year for a few shows. Cool. And I was just like, mate, do you want to do this? Like we can help. Like he doesn't need to do music full time. He's like an engineer. He has other businesses. It's not something that he's kind of ever thought. It was always a hobby. Until I was like, do you want to fucking do it? So yeah, like with him, it's like, it's just bringing the whole story together. And kind of, he's got some great releases on some great labels, but it's just been a hobby for him. So it's like, how do we turn that into a bit more of a career? So yeah, I think, and then there might be some artists that like I signed that like are completely nobodies. but have great music. So it's like, okay, well, how do we build a picture? How do we tell your story before anybody knows? So like, come on tour with me for a year, if you know what I mean. Do a remix for me. Let's get you remixes on some other labels. Let's build like a bit of a picture up before we then release your record. But the good thing about like the team that run my label, they're like all for it as well. So it's just about, and my manager Ryan, it's just him and I. He manages one other guy called Alex. I forgot his artist name, Alex Soul, who's very brand new and like makes wicked music. So it's still like I want to build like a family that we can do everything ourselves, and we don't need to kind of outsource anything. Because for me, that's just so much more important.
That is so similar to how I think about it all, in terms of, all the people that I've worked with, or like friends that I've met along the way. Most of my friends, 99% of my friends I've met either through music or through clubbing, or and we all have that shared love, and all of them have a burning passion for it, the same way that I do, but not all of them have the opportunities to, or the kind of flexibility to be able to throw themselves at it full time. So I've got, I've got a mate, and he's making really fantastic, super raggy, like hardcore techno. And I've been kind of helping him and steering him, because I think, he's got something really great about the music he makes. And ultimately, I want to be doing this as my job and career and spend my life doing this, but so do other people. Like, so do other of my friends. And if there's a way for me to be able to help my friends do this, then that's great, because then we can share it together. That's even more fun and even more exciting when it's with your friends too.
For me, it's there's nothing more important than that. It's just by being able to like, obviously there comes a point when you have to concentrate on yourself to then be able to give that to other people, or to be able to help other people. But once you're at the point where you can, and like I'm still small in the grand scheme of artists, like and I'm not saying that in like to kind of fish for compliments. I have a great life and I have a great career, but from where I want to be compared to where I am now is nowhere near where we're at. But if I can help somebody in the smallest way, then let's do it, if you know what I mean. And let's kind of grow something together so that we can all look back in 20, 30 years time and go, we had the best fucking time. Like that's what it's about for me. 100%.
And like definitely that and building something as well, something that you can look back on and go, we did that really well. And that for me, I feel that my focus came away from music, I think, because I got, like I said, I really love mastering. Like there's something incredibly satisfying about it. You get sent a record and it's a good record, but there's maybe a couple of things that could be finessed in the production to bring out the best in the master. And then you master it, send it back, and generally it's a pretty, it's a positive experience, right? And it, like send it back, and people are like, oh wait, it's sick, and then play it out, and like, oh, it sounded great. The way it's kind of tied up in a neat little bow, like they send it to you, you have a listen, you send it back, maybe a couple of times, get it absolutely perfect. And then it's like a job done, and it's really satisfying to have that sort of quite compact job that's done and finalized. And I do, on a really busy day, probably 10, maybe 15 masters. I mean, it depends on like some of them take 20 minutes, half an hour, some of them take an hour. It varies from track to track. So sometimes I'm really super busy and like doing a lot on one track, and sometimes you get stuff sent through and you're just like, wow, it's a breeze. It doesn't even really need too much doing to it. but the problem is, it's like it's easy to fall into. It's like, oh, I've got 10 masters in my inbox. I'll do those 10 masters because I know that I'll tick those off and that's it. But then I won't have written any music that day. And that, as I got a better, kind of like a bigger reputation, I suppose, and recommended to more artists, it just completely got away from me. And I was, up until fairly recently, I was doing 7 days a week of mastering, somewhere between, on a weekend doing like 4 or 5 hours a day, and during the week doing 10 hours. And I was enjoying it, but it got on top of me.
Yeah.
And then I thought, what am I doing? Like, my intent was never to do this as a job. It was a way of earning a bit of money so that I could afford to write music.
Yeah.
And I just got so locked into the building the business and having a successful business and working with ever increasingly higher profile artists and got caught up in that, like, kind of buzz of that I completely lost the sight of the music side of things. And like you asked me earlier on about if I engineered, and I did for years. And actually, one of the things that is making music is it takes emotion and it takes energy.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that on tap for people 4 days a week,
takes it out of you.
And it really, really takes it out of you so
100%.
much. And I never realized it was actually the pandemic starting and not being able to do studio sessions that I had a year of not working with people, and I just felt so much better, so much more clear-headed and more energy. And I was like, I think that was a kind of realization that probably wasn't the best use of my
time,
creative energy and such. So
there also comes a point of it where it's you earn money, you have to pay your rent or your mortgages or whatever, but there comes a point where we do music to have fun and to enjoy it, and you don't necessarily want it to become a job, or you don't want that job aspect. I know I used to engineer for people, and like it would be like, oh God, got this person coming down. And as much as I love the process and I love, like, you have to perform. Like, they're paying you for your time and you have to perform. And if you don't perform, you're like, well, what the fuck? Like, and you can't perform all the time when you're writing.
Did you find that you were more critical of yourself than the people you were working? Like, I found with writing for people, if it wasn't turning out really well, I got really frustrated at myself and I was overly critical.
Yeah, for me, it was like, I don't know, actually, because I think for me, we'd always churn something out. I think what it would be is like 5 years later when I listen to that stuff, I'm like, oh, I could have done better than that. And I feel a bit stupid that I charged them for that. But I'm now working on a project now, writing with somebody that you actually mix and master. But like for me, that project is more than just like, I don't get paid for it. It's kind of a passion project, and it's, don't get me wrong, I will get paid for it eventually when with splits and things like that. But it's more like, I want this person to succeed and I want to make the best music for this person that they want to make. And I think that for me is like a really happy balance with the engineering side of things, because there's not really any pressure for me. Like, if I don't make a record that's really good, then it's not coming out. Yeah. And if we do a writing session and it doesn't go well, it is what it is, if you know what I mean. It's just the joys. And I think that's nice because there's no actual like finance being, there's no finances involved. So I don't feel like I'm wasting their time, and I don't feel like I'm getting cheapskated out.
Yeah, it's not like if you have that session and they're paying X amount for the session. Yeah. And at the end of it, if it's not finished, you don't beat yourself up and they don't feel shortchanged.
Exactly.
You just go, we'll start again next time. Or I mean, that's what I'm basically doing with, like, there's 3 friends I'm working with. one is a prog house project, one's a techno project, and one is like cool, like kind of deeper house stuff. All three of the guys I'm working with are great DJs, and we just need some tunes out.
Yeah.
I mean, they're gigging anyway, so it's just a matter of building on that.
Yeah.
But it means that the production sessions are fun.
Yeah.
And also, rather than them paying me and saying, make me a track like this, they come around and we say, what sort of tune should we make?
Yeah.
Like, and we'll discuss it together, and it's a collaboration.
Yeah.
And that's way more enjoyable.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. I think that's what it should be, really. Because otherwise you just lose the like actual art of it, and it just becomes formulaic, and then that's what becomes this industry right now, is that you get music that's just formulaic as fuck. And
it really is. I mean, I don't know, like the thing is, the problem with it is that is what breeds success. So an artist will essentially find a sound that works and we'll repeat that sound with a few little changes.
Yeah.
Change the hook, or, just each track will sound very similar.
Yeah.
I'm particularly talking about tech house here, because that's something that I work on a lot.
Yeah.
Like you just hear, it's just different iterations and just release loads of tunes that all sound the same. But that people, like fans, seem to like that.
Yeah.
Like, if you've got an artist with a really consistent sound, I suppose there's a border between consistency and sameness, right? So, like, I would say that you have a consistent sound, actually, but that's not a insult.
No,
whereas a samey sound, that, like, if some artists have a samey sound, so like, your sound is consistent. Like, you hear a record and like, that's a Will Clarke record, and it's got that like chunkiness, but it's more to do with the production. The variation from track to track is massive. Like, you might go for a big string hook, or you might have like a chord stab, that drives it, or vocals that are different every time. Whereas some artists, they clearly just use the same project, switch something out, and then pinged it off to another label and released it. And the thing is, it does really work though. So they end up getting their tracks played loads and signing to loads of labels and having success. So
I think it works to a certain level though. I think there comes a point when that formulaic side of things actually just stops working for you, unless you're the person that's created that formula. Or there's let's say for instance there's like 5 people that like created that formula for that sound. Like let's say for instance Fish, right? With Fisher. Like, he had that sound, he made that sound, and then everyone tried to copy him after. Like, Eric Prydz made that sound, and then everyone tried to copy him after.
Nobody succeeded.
And no, exactly. And that's the thing, is like, there's people that people will get small success out of copying, or out of going with that same genre or that same formulaic sound. But it doesn't necessarily always last. But I also don't know how artists do it when they just, like you said, is they just make the same record over and over again, but they just changed the hip hop sample to like 1995 to 1996. Like, I don't know how people can sit down and be like, this is a banger. I can't wait to play this, because it's like, I don't know. But hey, there's so many people that do it so well and are very successful.
I guess that's the cynical side, isn't it? Where it's the like, success is more important than creativity. I mean, I don't know. Where do you stand on so many tracks coming out being like remakes of like 90s tracks, or where do you stand on that?
I have like mixed views, because I'm a killer for sampling old records.
Like, do you think
But
so like there's some of the samples you use, like the big soul samples. Yeah. Where are you digging up those acapellas from? You're not going to tell us, obviously.
I'm not going to tell you that. They're either samples that I know, like from old soul records, or just YouTube. I just go hunting on YouTube and go. I watch a lot of films, so there's like films have great soundtracks, so I just go through soundtracks. There's lots of that, but I love sampling. We're in house music. House music is all about sampling. For me, when I'm sampling, I want to sample something that I can't really say this as well, because Hallelujah is like my biggest record, which is obviously such a fucking famous house sample with Candy Staten. But most other samples I've sampled are like, no one has really heard of them. No one really knows where they're from, which is really important to me, because it's like, how do I get a sample from a song that I love as the original? How do I make it my own? Like the hymn was an Aretha Franklin sample of her singing Amazing Grace in her film Amazing Grace. But I don't think like you'd know it's Aretha Franklin, but you wouldn't know that it was Amazing Grace if you go and listen to that film. But how do I feel about the records that are sampling big old house records? I have no issue with it if it's done really well. But I think there's a lot of and obviously that's personal opinion. Like what is done really well, I don't really know. But there comes a point when it's like, oh, come on, guys, we've all heard this about 10 times. Do something a little bit different if you want to sample it. What about you?
I honestly don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I think that there are some artists who it seems like the only music they release is a remix of a massive 90s dance tune. And they've done like 7 or 8 of them, and they've all been quite successful. I think and it's not even that there's good and bad. Yeah. So some of them, the remixes are just taking whatever the hook is, sticking in the breakdown, and then a tech house drop with a bit of a cut of the vocal. It's like, well, sure, it's going to be effective on a dance floor, but it's just flipping like, I don't know. Is it improving on it, or even trying? Is it even trying to improve on the original? No, I don't think it is. You know, there's, but yeah, like you say, the whole, like music, the music we make and the house music is like a massive part of it is sampling. Yeah, and it's really important, and you can sample something and build on it and make something new, and that's when it becomes, you know, more creative again. And I think as long as there's a kind of creative intent behind it, then that's good. I think if it's just a cynical, like cash grab, or like, you know, trying to get exposure off the back of somebody's work without trying to create anything new from it, then that's not, I don't know, then that takes the art away from it. And then I guess I'm opposed to that. So if there's some art to it, I like it. If not, then not.
Yeah, totally. I think the thing that's really interesting though now is like the old house records, like kids that are going to clubs don't know that they're old house records. Yeah. Which is really interesting to me. And I think to a certain extent, that's why I kind of like that some of them are being redone. Because it's like, well, these kids have never heard the original records. They've never heard it. Like even with Hallelujah, like with like there was a lot of people that had never heard that Hallelujah record. And I can guarantee you 90% of people that knew the Lars vocal remix on Defected of the Hallelujah don't have a clue of the original Candy Staten record that was on like her Hymns of God or whatever it was. So there's something about that I love, and the younger kind of ravers are kind of getting to know these records. Something that really gets to me is, why can't we make records like that anymore? Why like for me is like I'm trying to write records that stand the test of time, that last 20 years. Why can't we make records like they did then, with those hooks and those samples and everything like that? That's the thing that I struggle with, is that...
Do you think that that's the case then? You think that there aren't records being made that will stand the test of time?
I think there is. I think there's a massive amount of records that will stand the test of time. But I also think that nostalgic sound that we all look back at, right? I don't think there's a single artist that doesn't look back at the nostalgia of the 90s. But it would be really interesting to like... I don't think people are making records that are like that big. Let's look at Armand van Helden. Like, he's an absolute legend. He's written some absolute bombs. Is there anyone making records like he used to make? Like that kind of influential in the scene where everyone's playing them, not just like one genre, like where everyone's playing.
Do you know, like, so there's there's a psychology behind the more you hear something, the more familiar it is, the more you like it.
Yeah,
which explains like really, really terrible records that have done really well.
Yeah.
That you just hear them so much. It's a big part of how the pop charts works. And, you know, if you get something on rotation on Radio 1, that familiarity of that makes it sound better than it is. Totally. And actually that's a big part of like writing music. And if you write something and listen to it over and over and over again, particularly this kind of applies to like up and coming producers who are learning and, you know, maybe take quite a long time on a project. When you're really close to a record for a long time writing it, you become so familiar with it that you think it sounds great. And then when you send it out to people, like, like, you know, I see this like really so fundamentally in mastering.
Yeah.
And so like one of the biggest records I ever mastered, I won't name the records, but
go on, name it. Why can't you name it?
No, I won't name it, but like it's a massive, like super catchy piano house record, absolute corker of a track. Now, when I got the pre-master through first, there was two like awful mega bum notes in the vocal that were clearly hitting flat. Yeah. They were like semitone off and like just sounded so bad. And I was like, and it's been through the A&R process with an A&R team with 4 or 5 people on it. It's been played out in clubs and nobody had picked up on this because everybody had heard it and just they were so used close to it.
Yeah.
And I was like, guys, this is really out of tune. And they were like, what? And then, you know, it took me, I said, send me the vocal stem, and I corrected the 2 notes because they couldn't figure out which bit I was talking about. Yeah. I corrected it, sent it back over, and they're like, oh, yeah. It was like, how did nobody spot it? But it's basically because that repetition and hearing it so much, it blinds you to how stuff sounds. But conversely, when you hear stuff loads, it's so familiar that it's almost like you mentioned it's nostalgia. Yeah. It's like a comfort thing and a familiarity thing that's really something that our brains gravitate towards. So those records, yes, they are great records, but something that also, you know, something like Good Life by In the City, for example, it's an amazing record and it has, you know, like a good hook and everything, but also we've heard it so
many
much
times,
and so we know that it's a great record, but we've also heard it a lot, and it's familiar and it's nostalgic, and it comes on and everybody buzzes when it comes on, which adds into that nostalgia and that warm feeling you get from hearing it. If that record was released now, would it have had the same response? No, I think something that's fundamentally different now to then is that the number of records that was coming out was so much less because producing a record cost a lot more. So which meant that like that track was made in a professional studio, probably tracked vocally quite a few times. It was, money was spent on making that record, but also they knew that record would sell enough to make that money back. That's not the case now. Like, you can make an amazing record and maybe it will get, a few million streams, but more likely, it won't.
Yeah.
And so do you invest all of that money in, really, like, the soul vocals and stuff like that? Those, if you listen to like old R&B records, they have vocal tracking and, like so many different recordings and layering it up, and like the production on the vocals from like 90s, early 2000s R&B is phenomenal. But that production costs money to get it sounding that great. Whereas now so many artists have home studios and maybe don't have access to an engineer and a massive SSL mixing desk and all that. So there's been a sort of regression in terms of
quality.
But that's because there's less money to invest in each individual track.
Yeah. No, you're right, and you hit the nail on the head, because I think the thing that kind of stood out to me the most in that what you said was a few million streams, and it's like even a few million streams doesn't earn you anything nowadays. Like barely anything. Like, I think 10 million streams and you've earned a good chunk of change, but you're not going to live off that for a year, really. And I think that's the thing, is that back in the day you could make actual money from it. Like, but also there wasn't every Tom, Dick and Harry releasing a record to kind of just fog it. Like, it's not, I think it's not even the fact that there's shit tracks and great tracks being released so often. It's just the amount of music that's getting released. I remember when Beatport first started, you couldn't get your music on Beatport because they were so exclusive. Like, it was like cool to be on Beatport. Now we're in the business game. They want as much music as possible to be released as many times as they possibly can, because one person buying one record is great, but one person buying, or 10,000 people buying a single different record, 10,000 records is a lot more money. And that's when the kind of the artists struggle, I think. How did you find it with like going into the mastering business? Because how long have you been doing mastering for? With AMPM?
Probably, like, so AMPM I started about 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
But I was mastering before. So the reason I got into it was because I used to A&R for a trance label.
Yeah.
This is like 2003, 2004, something like that. And I signed a few tracks to them, and then I got a master back from their mastering engineer. And they paid like 15 quid for this master. And in the middle of the breakdown, as all trance tracks did at the time, it had this massive big sub-boom kick that went...
Yeah.
And when that happened, all the other sounds ducked to nothing. And then, like, because of the bad mastering, and they just put it out. And so when, it got played out, and in the middle of the track, everything disappears apart from this huge kick drum, and then it all slowly fades back up. And I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
That is rubbish. I can do better than that. And I said to label, how much are you paying for mastering? They were like £15. I was like, okay, well, I'll do it for £10. I'll master my own stuff, and I'll master other stuff on the label, save you a bit of money, and I'll do a better job.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into it. And then I started, mastering for a few more trance labels, because I was, essentially undercutting my kind of closest competition.
Yeah.
Motherfucker. Yeah. So ruthless. Just like, this guy's charging £15. I'll charge £14.50. But at a certain point, I got really good at it.
Yeah.
Like, I think one of the things so there are mastering engineers out there who are high volume, I guess. So they do a lot of them. And I think, how do you do so many masters? Like, you know, it for me, each one takes half an hour to an hour, dependent on, you know, various different factors. But part of it is like, you have to listen through the track, and you have to, you know, figure out what's right and what's not right in it, and then feed back to the artist if needs be, and master it, and then listen through it and check it on a couple of different things. So some people are just churning them out, but I could never do that because I'm a perfectionist, which is very annoying. So I was doing these masters, but I got good at it, and I think I'm a producer as well. Yeah. So producer and mastering engineer, they go hand in hand, because I can explain technically what's going on. Yeah. Because I can write, I'm producing and mixing and everything. So that's why, you know, my feedback sometimes comes back and it's super specific. It's like this frequency range, turn it like knocked out 2 dB or something like that, you know, or you know, there's so many different specifics that it's only possible to know how to fix them from actually being able to produce. Yeah. So there are some mastering engineers who are just mastering engineers, and some who are producers. Like Robert Babbage is a producer and a mastering engineer, and he's fantastic. Yeah. I went off on a tangent there. I forgot what you asked me.
I didn't really ask you anything, but it's great. we were talking about...
15 years ago, that was the question.
Yeah, we were talking about costs. Like, what I was trying to get at was like the costs, because from what I remember back when I first started writing and releasing music, mastering was expensive. Mm-hmm. And like... going to a mastering house was going to cost you a good chunk of change, but it's got cheaper over the years. Mm-hmm. How did you kind of sit in that way? Like, I need to make money, but I also have to be like good value.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I kind of rode the wave of the mastering software becoming really good and essentially pretty much indiscernible from the hardware. Yeah. So all these big mastering studios in central London, in Soho, they charged 75, 80, 100 quid for a master even. Yeah. And they were on an SSL desk, and like the really good desks and the really good kit for a studio goes into like the hundreds of thousands of pounds to get out a mastering studio for the absolute top level. But they don't just buy that outright. It's essentially like a mortgage. Yeah. So they have to pay back their thousands of pounds a month, plus their business rates in their central London studio. So they have to charge those rates. Yeah. And the price didn't necessarily equate to a better master. And that's essentially what I kind of did. So I remember doing a master for one of the artists I was producing for, like engineering for at the time, and it's signed to Tool Room. And I got chatting to Matt Smallwood, who's the A&R at Tool Room, and just an all-round absolute legend.
He's a legend, yeah.
We got chatting, and I was like, well, I'll do some mastering for you, and we could see how it goes. And just pitched a price, and they were paying like £70 a master or something like that, I guess. You know, like they were going to like a really high-profile studio. Yeah. And I was like, why don't I do some, and you see how they are, and, you know, you can kind of see where it goes from there. And after about a month, I did all of the Tool Room stuff. Yeah. And I still do the lion's share of the Tool Room mastering. And that's probably, I don't know, it must be like 9 years, something like that. And yeah, that was actually a bit of a big break for me, working with such a big label. And, you know, Mark Knight, who's obviously the kind of head of the label, he was always kind of like sang my praises and recommended me to people. So, you know, recommended me to people like Booker Shade and Calvin Harris, and people like that, you know. So ended up, you know, they really helped me in terms of recommending me. But yeah, so like my studio, like I spent money on it and I made sure that I was up to date on everything. I always got like the really important thing I think is having really good headphones.
Yeah.
Okay. I was always spending loads of money on headphones and, you know, different monitoring setups. So I spent quite a lot of money in terms of getting my setup right. But compared to the hundreds of thousands of pounds that the big studios are spending, it's you know, a drop in the ocean. So I didn't like they couldn't compete. Yeah. And when I took Toolroom, when I started working with Toolroom, they stopped working with this studio. They even said like, "Oh, we can offer you a lower rate," but they couldn't offer as low a rate as I was doing. Yeah. So I did undercut them to the point where they lost that business. I guess it's the kind of march of the technology, really, isn't it? Yeah. That this older stuff, it has a prestige to it, and it has a bit of a kind of mystery to it and a magic to it. Like, you know, still all these producers who don't ever go anywhere near a gigantic SSL desk in a shiny studio when they're actually writing tunes will have their promo shots done in front of them because it just looks so cool. Yeah. But the reality of it is that software is phenomenal now. Like, and it actually can do stuff that hardware can't do. Like to get a little bit geeky, like the limiters, the software limiters with the look ahead function can essentially react to stuff in faster than real time, you know. So that means that they can do things that hardware limiters aren't even capable of doing now. And that's a great...
And they're so much more reliable to a certain extent. Like, especially the old stuff. If you've got like an old desk or an old compressor, like it's not always going to turn on. It's not always going to work. And that's the joys of hardware, right? It's like synths, like old synths. They're not always going to be in tune. But when you're running a business, it's got to be reliable.
It's got to be consistent, yeah. And like, you know, and a massive part of it as well is the time it takes. Yeah. So like the thing that when I'm doing a master, the thing I want to be spending the most amount of time on is listening to the track and, you know, like kind of really fine tuning it and making sure that I'm getting the best of it. I don't want to then spend X amount of time just rendering stuff out, checking it, and then having to render it out. So if you're using a desk and you have to render it all out in real time, and it's, you know, a lot of tracks I master are like 8-9 minutes. Yeah. So if each time you render it out in real time, it's 9 or 10 minutes. Then you've got to go away, have a cup of tea, come back, you know, and it eats into your productivity time. So yeah, like I'll do the master and render it out in 2 minutes, in which time I can type up the email saying, this is what's shit about your track and this is what's good.
Because I remember I used to use Optimum mastering in Bristol. And I forgot his name. Let me Google his name. Optimum. Do you know those guys, Optimum?
No.
Fuck, I forgot his name. Really nice guy. His studio's unbelievable. Like, set up for Dolby 7.1, PMC stacks. Beautiful. Like, he runs everything digitally, but it's all digital hardware, really. Right. But yeah, he, like you were saying, he had costs of the building, he had costs of all of that, and his masters were great. But when you're paying like 150 quid for a master, and then you've got to pay for everything else, and then you got this and that, and you're just like, well, I want the records to sound as good as possible, but if somebody can do it better, that's better or the same, cheaper and quicker, and getting changes, because it's because when you ask for changes, they have to kind of recall everything, which is a process as well, which you can recall that in a second by loading up the project. It's kind of a no-brainer.
It is now that software is caught up with hardware. I mean, you know, there are some things that hardware can do that software, you know, arguably can't or won't do as well.
Distortion.
Yeah, but I'm not really distorting people's masters.
You're not. You shouldn't be as well. So it's like
it's like, do you know what this needs? Just a shitload of distortion on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've not done that. Not yet. I might do that a couple of times today. See how it sounds.
It's not on mine, mate. Not on mine.
No. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I think for me, like the workflow is important because. One of the things that definitely is the case is with a lot of mastering engineers, they get sent the track, they master it, and they send it back.
Yeah.
And there isn't necessarily the same back and forth.
Yeah.
But actually, for me, it's almost like makes life easier for me.
Yeah.
If something's really sticking out, I did a little post about low end on my Facebook a couple of days ago. I don't know if you do any like links or anything for the podcast.
Yeah, we can put it in.
I'll send you this like little bit that I have kind of a breakdown of how to do like some common mistakes or common pitfalls with low end.
Yeah.
So this feedback I give really regularly on tracks, and part of it is to help the artist produce a track better, so that the outcome is better.
Yeah.
But also it does make, like, if we can iron out those issues quite easily in the pre-master, then it does make my life easier as a mastering engineer. You know, people want dynamics and they want like loudness, and those two are difficult to get at the same time, right? But with a few little tweaks to the mix, it's possible to get dynamics and loudness.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the really common things, and it seems to have happened like 50 times over the last couple of weeks, is producers having massive long tails on their kick drum. And that's like, so for techno, that's fine because you want like a big rumbly low end. Yeah. But for house, if you have a punchier kick drum, so a shorter low end, like shorter tail, and it opens up a lot of headroom and a lot of space in the bass. Like for you to actually push things louder, and you've got more space for your bass line and all that sort of thing. So I just was like, well, I seem to be feeding this back to artists a lot. I'll put a Facebook post up, and then I could just copy that text and say to like artists when they send a track through with those similar issues, I can say, I'll just put this post up and this might help. Yeah. And it's been quite useful in terms of speeding up the process for mastering as well, which is good.
Yeah, to be fair, like now we've got a bit of a relationship going, I always send you my records beforehand and be like, I'm struggling with this. Like, can you give me some pointers on this? Or what's your thoughts on this? And like 9 times out of 10, you give me the answers I want to hear, and it just makes the whole process so much easier. And I use you as my second pair of ears, really. It's really important for me, is like, having somebody that because I wouldn't class myself as like a technically great producer, or engineer. I know what sounds good and I know what's going to work in my sets, but technically I don't, mate. The amount of I literally never compress anything. I never do ever anything that should technically be right. My mix downs are terrible, but
that's definitely not the case.
It is though when I compare it to other people, like it's a process. Like for us, like you'll give me pointers and it will make it better, or you might mix down a record, or you might mix down the record, send it back to me, then I'll go, actually no, I need to do this and this on the record, and then be like, actually can you master this? And I think that's the whole thing, is that I think with what you've done at AMPM is like you've given a bit of I don't know, it's more than just mastering. It's really important, man. I absolutely love it, and like I talk your praises to everybody about what you guys kind of offer, and it really annoys me when people go to other people and get a shit job, because I'm like, I told you should have gone here. But again, it goes back to that keeping, like, building a crew and having like the best of the best working with you, because I think that's how you get the best. Like, I would never master my own records. Like, so I need to find somebody that's the best of the best. I think the first record you mastered for me was, I think it was Techno Not Techno, which was me and Bot, which came out on Shadow Child's label. I think you mastered that for me the first time. I can't really remember.
I'd be able to go back and find out what the first one is, because I keep every mastering project I've ever done, I've still got.
Oh, really? Yeah, that'd be interesting. But I think that was the one. And the track that I did it with my mate Bot, Andrea, and he's technically an unbelievable like mix guy. Unbelievable. And when you sent the masters over, he was like, I don't know how he's done it. I don't know how he's got this amount of dynamics, but also slammed it. And that was through the time when slamming your records was like key.
Yeah.
Before it kind of, everyone chilled out a little bit. But like, it's just so important to have somebody else in your production team, for me anyway, to like, that can tell you, no, mate, this sounds shit. You need to do this to make it sound better. It's like...
I'm very careful about the wording to not go, well, a load of rubbish, you fix it by doing this. I think, you touched on like, it's basically the things, know the things that you're good at, but know your limitations.
Totally.
And when you recognize your limitation, or when you know that there's something that you can look to someone else to help you get it bang on, and that's the way to go. I mean, I do it for like the music is like my domain, I think, and I'm quite I'm almost a bit like precious about it, like it, but then I have sent stuff out. So actually I brought on another engineer to AM PM
cool.
like last year. So my mate Tim Cullen, and
I know Tim.
I do, yeah, you know Tim, yeah. So he's he runs a DJ agency, and like they do function DJ, like functions and all sorts. And obviously because of the pandemic, that just completely died a death. And so I actually, when we were just having a brief chat before we started the podcast, I said about how a couple of people I've been working with had essentially got information out of me and then set up a rival mastering studio. And that's happened actually 3 times over the last 15 years. Even to the point where some of them actually went after my client list. So they knew who I was working with, and just emailed them and said, I've learned some stuff from Andy. I can do it the same, but for £10 cheaper, And so I was super cagey about giving stuff away, and I'd never worked with anybody, because what if they, I taught them how to do it, and then they just went and set up their own mastering studio.
Yeah.
But then with Tim, it was a logical thing, because we've been friends for probably about nearly 15 years. And he's such a good guy, and he's really trustworthy. And obviously, because his business dropped off during the pandemic, and because mine went crazy, I was like, I need some help. And Tim, can you help me out? And trained him up on the mastering. And actually, that's great, because it made me realise that I don't have to be a one-man band just doing everything myself. And like, I was a bit of a control freak, maybe. Yeah. And now I'm like, okay, Tim's actually he's smashing it. Like he picked it up really fast, again, because he's a really good producer. I think that's fed into his ability to hear things that he needs to hear and feed back in a kind of easy to understand way. So he's taken a bit of the pressure off me in terms of the workload, but I've also been able to send tracks over to him for him to master and him feed back and say, so that's been really nice as well. But having that realization that I don't have to do it all myself, and I don't need to be in control, and that actually some people are going to be better at stuff than I am. That is a really good realization, and I will, I feel like that was quite a valuable lesson to learn.
I think it's so important because I think, like what you said with other people kind of taking what you've taught them and then starting their own thing, I think it's going to happen. It's normal, right? It's like there's producers out there that I've sent them a record that I've done. They've asked to do a collab on it. I've said no. And then they've just gone and made a cardboard copy of it. Like, it happens. But my view on it, after the initial angry emotions or sad emotion, whatever the emotions are to start with, once I processed it, I'm like, well, first of all, they've not done a better job than me. Mm-hmm. Second of all, they're copying a Will Clarke record, which is exactly the same for mastering. Like, every mastering engineer is different. Everyone's ears are different. Like, you might use exactly the same tools, but how it comes out is completely different to what somebody else would. No one has your ears. And I think what's the word? What's the saying? It's like copying is the best form of
imitation is the highest form of flattery.
That's the one, yeah. And it's so true. And until after you get over that process of someone's trying to screw me over business wise, and you realize that's never going to happen, like, it's like, okay, cool. They can have everything. Mm-hmm. I can tell them everything because they're never going to do it as well as I am. Mm-hmm. And they're never you. They might do something better than you, but they still can't do what you do better. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, kind of like after a while, I kind of went, yeah. I think the bit that really bugged me was that they went after my client list.
Yeah.
I had a list of all the people I work with on my website, and they essentially emailed them all the ones that they knew. I was like, okay. Yeah. So that I suppose they're starting up a rival company is okay to do.
Yeah.
It's business at the end of the day.
Totally.
There's ways of doing it honorably, I suppose.
I totally agree. I think it's just, for me, it's just trying to keep so insular and not. And it's taken me years, and I still haven't cracked it, and I'm still trying to crack it. It's like, how can I stop looking at others and look at myself? Mm-hmm. And how, like, me realizing that because this artist is doing that, I don't have to be doing that, if that makes sense. It's weird. It's really strange, but I guess that kind of goes hand in hand with business as well. Is like generally the business that does it first does it the best, and then a bigger corporation goes and buys them out because they want the good ideas from the kids. Like somebody will do something unique that maybe the inertia of big business doesn't allow. Yeah. And rather than that innovation comes from smaller companies or setups. Yeah, that's definitely the case. Totally, man.
What's the tattoo? What's the song on your tattoo?
Candy Staten, You Got the Love.
My all-time favorite track.
Same.
Is it? Yeah. Cool. I never got a tattoo of it though. Wow. Yeah, that is my all-time favorite.
Yeah, it's classic. Absolutely classic. Dude, we've just done an hour and a half and it's gone by fucking quick.
It has, yeah. I don't really think we've covered everything.
No, we really haven't, but I'm going to piss my pants and we should probably get cracking. How can people follow you as AMPM? How can people get their tracks mastered by you? And also, how can people follow you as an artist as well?
You can email me, info@ampm.audio.
Mate, I've got to say, I love your auto replies on your emails. Yeah. Every time I'm like, fuck's sake, another auto reply from Andy.
Yeah, I have been away quite a lot recently.
No, it's every time I email you, and then I get a response like pretty much straight away. But I'm just like,
the auto reply is to keep at bay the people who. So everybody thinks that their track is incredibly urgent.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, which it isn't. So it's like, okay, I'll put this auto reply and hopefully they'll go and say, it's not that important. So give me a bit of time. So you can find like ampm.audio is my website, but find me on Facebook. You can ping me a message there. In terms of the music I make, I guess the Trilucid stuff is the kind of proggy stuff that I'm putting out at the moment. That's if you've got any questions, just ping me an email.
Sick, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me on, Will.
It's been a wicked conversation. I loved it. Stay on, but I'm just going to end up. Big love, man. Keep safe.
Cheers, man.
And that's a wrap. Big love, dude. That was amazing. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to share it. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Keep safe. See you next time.